Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. This is the Fast Friday edition of the show for January 21st, 2022. And I recently did an episode talking about the 4 essential steps needed to nullify federal gun control. And this included following James Madison's advice in Federalist Number 46 for states to use legislative devices and a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. Basically, in modern times, that means stop the state from helping enforce federal gun control. And since the feds are very low on resources and the feds and states are partners on most federal programs, including federal gun control programs, we know that partnerships don't work too well when half the team quits. So banning a state from participating in this type of enforcement activity is a big step towards bringing them to an end. So on this episode, with the 2022 state legislative sessions just getting underway around the country, I've got a quick status report update to let you know about the state level bills that we're tracking so far. And I expect a bunch more in the near future. But first of all, before getting to that, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. Our show homepage has everything you need to follow this show, all the archives, individual episodes like this one today. I will link to the stuff that I'm talking about so you can read, learn more, and even take action and support on your own time. You can find all the different platforms, video and audio only podcast platforms, and even our membership program where you can put your financial faith behind our work for as little as $2 a month. The show homepage again is 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And I couldn't be more grateful for you spending some of your time with me today. Thank you so much for being here, whether this is your first episode or you've been here for every single one since day one. Thank you so much. But since it's Fast Friday, I promise to not take up too much of your time. I'll do my best. Let's see if I can get this info out to you in the next 10 to 15 minutes. And I want to first start out by pulling up this episode that I mentioned, January 6th of this year, 4 essential steps to nullify federal gun control. You really should check this out because what I'm talking about is really just one of those steps, and it really takes more than just one to get the job done. But this is an important part of the overall strategy. Again, that will be linked to in the show notes at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. So let's get right to the state level bills that we're tracking, or at least the primary ones. And if you stick around till the end, hopefully I'll have enough time to give you a quick overview of things that you can do to take action in support of any, or I guess all of these, depending on how you look at it. We're going to start out in New Hampshire with House Bill 1178. It's got, I think, 12 co-sponsors right now, pretty decent amount. And this legislation would ban the state and its political subdivisions from using any personnel, or political subdivisions are usually like the local governments, from using any personnel or financial resources to enforce, administer, or cooperate with any law, act, rule, order, or regulation of the United States government or executive order of the President of the United States that is inconsistent with any New Hampshire law regarding the regulation of firearms, ammunition, ammunition feeding devices, firearm components, firearm supplies, or knives. And silence in the New Hampshire Code, they say, our New Hampshire statutes, means it is considered an inconsistency for the purpose of this. So it would basically say, if it's purely a federal gun control measure, we are totally hands off. And this is very similar in approach and strategy to a law passed in Arizona last year. So we're starting to see this type of move hopefully catch on. We also have pending legislation in Nebraska, LB 188. And it's the same type of approach. If it's just federal gun control, the state would then back off and say, we're not going to participate. Keep in mind, there's a lot of state level gun control that has to be gotten rid of as well. But this is a step forward in the process. And here from a report by Mike Meharry from the Nebraska bill, he said, while passage into law wouldn't end all gun control in Nebraska or New Hampshire or elsewhere on day one, it would represent a massive shift in strategy going forward. Once in effect, the bill would immediately do the following. 1, ban state and local enforcement of federal gun control measures on the books that are not on the books in the state. 2, ban state and local enforcement of any new federal gun control measures that also might not be on the books in the state. And then 3, a strategy focus moving forward. Shift the focus and attention to any remaining gun control measures on the books in state law. And then 4, the most important part here, then encourage gun rights activists to work in future legislative sessions to repeal those state-level gun control measures as a follow-up. And then each state-level repeal would then represent a 1-2 punch, because if you have a concurrent gun control measure on the books at the state level as a federal one, as soon as you repeal it on the state level, first of all, you're getting rid of that, which is positive. But at the same time, because of this law, it would also then immediately automatically ban the state from helping enforce the federal version as well. So I think this is a very good strategy. We like seeing this as well. Next up in Iowa, Senate Bill or Senate File 2002 would ban any person, including any public officer or employee of the state and its political subdivisions, from enforcing any past, present, or future federal acts, laws, executive orders, administrative orders, court orders, rules, or regulations that infringe on the right to keep and bear arms. It does go into some descriptive detail on how this is handled and what they mean by that. It's very similar to the Missouri Second Amendment Preservation Act signed into law in 2021 after 8 years of work. This is probably potentially one of the best ones out there. It did pass in Iowa out of a subcommittee just on Wednesday. I don't know if they actually do vote totals there. And it now goes to the full Senate Judiciary Committee, where it has to pass in order to get to the full state Senate. There was an amendment recommendation in the subcommittee, so we'll need to keep an eye out on that, because amendments in this process, especially with law enforcement groups, always lobbying against this type of legislation because they love the power and the loot that goes along with working with the federal government on prohibition. So we'll keep an eye on that in case they throw some sneaky garbage in it. But the original filed bill from Senator Nunn was very solid, Senate File 2002, and we're happy to see that it passed out of subcommittee. And using that same strategy in Indiana, House Bill 1371, we will link to this one in the show notes as well. Same type of approach as Missouri. And then House Bill 2159 in West Virginia. I consider this one almost it's urgent everywhere, but in West Virginia, it's particularly urgent because there was an effort to do this in West Virginia last year in 2021. And right near the end of the legislative session, there was some lobbying by some interested and very powerful law enforcement lobby groups and some of the kind of establishment team in the state legislature. They watered the bill down, and instead of actually banning the state from enforcing it, they used language that sounded like it, but in essence, they were basically preserving and protecting the status quo. It's a pretty sneaky one that they passed last year. So this would actually fix the errors in that. And you can actually see the bill. There's a link in this report. If you just read the report, you can click through and read about the one that was passed last year. And then the last one that I want to cover for today is this really interesting one in Delaware, of all places, House Bill 276. And let me read from the report by Mike Meharry on this. On Tuesday, a Delaware House committee passed a bill that would help protect the right of authorized medical marijuana patients to buy or possess a firearm in the state, despite federal law to the contrary. The measure would also prohibit Delaware police from supplying information on patients to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS, which shouldn't exist in the first place. The idea of a federally run background check system is pretty awful. Here again from his report, he said, under the proposed law, Delaware law enforcement officers who encounter a person with a valid medical marijuana card cannot, quote, provide any information from any marijuana-related investigation of the person to any law enforcement authority that does not recognize the protection of this chapter, including NICS. So they're specifically citing the federal background check system that they're going to say, because the feds say no matter what, you can't, as soon as you start using a controlled substance, and they refuse to change this plant off their controlled substances list, and they say as soon as you use this, you cannot have a firearm. You lose your right to keep and bear, your natural right as a human being to keep and bear arms of self-defense. You're going to lose that if you choose to use medical marijuana. And in Delaware, they're saying, no, we got to do something about this. And this actually passed. It looks like, and I'm not sure how they do the voting there in Delaware. I'm not really familiar with, but there were no unfavorable votes in committee. There were 4 favorable, 3 on the merits. And so now it goes forward out of committee, and hopefully the full chamber will be able to take this up soon. It's sponsored by a combination, mostly Democrats and some Republicans. So to me, it's pretty fascinating that a bill like this is actually moving forward in Delaware. We'll keep an eye on that as well. That's House Bill 276. And just as a quick wrap up, I mentioned early at the beginning of the show, hey, what do you do if you want to support this stuff? So first of all, you're going to go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/path2liberty. That's the show homepage. I will publish a blog post for this particular episode about an hour to 2 hours after I'm done with this live broadcast here in a few minutes, hopefully. And that way you can look through the show notes for this episode. You can see the links to all these pieces of legislation that I'm talking about. I'm barely covering the actual overview of the legislation, so you really need to read some of the reports about these. You need to learn about the legislation. You have to understand what's going on. So that's step 1. And then step 2 is, if for those of you who live in any of these states, New Hampshire, Nebraska, Indiana, Iowa, Delaware, etc., if you live in any of these states, what you're going to do is take action in support of that legislation. First of all, in the bill report, you'll see, for example, let's see if I can pull up the Indiana one here. I just closed it by accident. Well, if you pull up, here we go. I just pulled up the link. In the bill report, it'll say HB 1371. You click on that. It's in red. It's a clickable link, or you tap on it on your mobile, and it's going to take you to this page on Legiscan, where we monitor most of the legislation. Then you'll learn there that in Indiana, House Bill 1371 is in the House Public Policy Committee. We know that a bill first gets assigned to a committee. The committee will schedule and hold a hearing, hopefully. Generally, it'll take some pressure if it's a good piece of legislation. So it'll take people calling and saying, we want to get a hearing on this. Once it's in committee, sometimes it has multiple hearings, but it has to get a vote to get out of the committee. And so it has to pass by a majority out of the committee before the next committee or the full chamber can do it. And then once it passes out of the chamber, then it goes to the other sides, from the House to the Senate, vice versa, until you go through that process again. So here in Indiana, for example, House Bill 1371 is in the House Public Policy Committee. So then you click the link for House Bill 1371 to the state legislature page, and you're going to get something that looks like this for those of you watching on video. And then you click through and you see, oh, it's in this committee. It says current bill actions. It's in Committee on Public Policy. It's been co-authored by these 2 people. This particular, it's not the same for every state, but in Indiana, you want to look up the committee. Now you want to look up the committee. Here's Committee on Public Policy, and it has a link where you can click on the members. And if you live in Indiana, not outside of Indiana, if you live in Indiana or for whatever state we're talking about here, you are going to want to actually contact every single member of the committee, whether you think they're good, bad, anything, it doesn't matter. You got to call them. Don't send them an email. That's easy to ignore. You make a phone call. You'll probably talk to an assistant. You give them your name. Be firm, but be courteous and be polite. If you act like a jerk, that absolutely will not work. In fact, a lot of times, even if they're on board, if you act like a jerk, these are politicians. Most of them tend to be kind of socio in some way. They may decide to go against you just because they don't like you. So try to be firm but polite and courteous. Show some respect to another human being, even though we know politicians often aren't. So let them know in this situation your name. Hey, my name is so-and-so. I support House Bill 1371. I see that it's in your Committee on Public Policy. When it comes up for a hearing, I would love to see you vote yes. If you've got any questions, please contact me. And then when you get to the committee chair, the only difference you're going to say is, I support this bill. I would love to see you. Could you please schedule this for a hearing and a vote? And you just do this over and over. And then, of course, you want to share links. You want to pass that information and these type of instructions around to as many people as possible in your state. And then rinse and repeat. Keep doing this until you get the result that you want. And then finally, step 3 for everybody who's not in one of these states, The first thing that you can do is go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. I got to do a little spamming here, a little self-promotion. As little as $2 a month, and you can become a member of the TAC, and nothing, absolutely nothing helps us roll up our sleeves and reach and teach more and more people about these types of action than the financial faith and support of our members. 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. That's the advertisement. But then you can also pick out one of these pieces of legislation that you like and say, hey, contact your state representative or state senator. Send them an email in this situation. Say, hey, I've got this piece of legislation that I read about from this other state that they're considering over there, and I'd like you to introduce this for our state. And then after you send an email, wait a few days and make a phone call. Phone calls make a huge difference. Anyways, hopefully that's all helpful. Hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully it was educational. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today. Please don't forget about that membership program over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Reviews on Apple Podcasts, smashing the like button on the video platforms, all that stuff helps spread the word, especially on those mainstream platforms. It'll tell the program to tell the algorithm to show our program to more people. Again, I really appreciate you spending some of your time with me today. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week here on the Path to Liberty.